It is my pleasure to introduce Deputy Mayor Alicia Glen.
Wow, this is like the Tonight Show, or it's pretty great. Thanks. Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you all for being here this morning. I was here last year, and it was just terrific, so I was really pleased to come back again, and since we got reelected, I guess I'm allowed to come back, so that's good. But, you know, right now I think is an interesting time for those of us who are in city government. I think it's fair to say that particularly for state and local government, we are living in a world of some scary unknowns. Obviously, I'm sure you've all been following in the paper the negotiations and the passage of federal tax bill is really something that we are very nervous about and following quite closely in terms of what the impact of that is going to be on our own economy and on the basic provisioning of services for New Yorkers and for people around the country. And in fact, very interested in how that's going to affect revenue and obviously investment in sectors like yours. But I think it's fair to say that we live in a time of tremendous uncertainty, and we're going to be very worried about and looking at the federal budget. I think for this crowd, I don't have to tell you that the impact of some of the issues being discussed on immigration policy, whether it's the basic stuff like just tourism and whether people feel like they want to come to America, whether or not we're going to continue to be able to attract the kind of talent from abroad that has been so critical to the development of our tech ecosystem here in New York, not to mention just sort of a culture of fear amongst so many students and potentially undocumented New Yorkers who, again, are so critical to the lifeblood of this city. And for those of you in education, obviously, the issues around those children who may be living in a culture of fear. I say all this not because it's sort of a gloom and doom picture, but it's because to really set the stage for why the work that people are doing in this room and the work that we do at the city level is really more important than ever. I mean, you know, you could take the view that this is all so horrible, you just want to get back into bed, pull your duvet over your head and call it a day, or you can get out and try to really make change. And I think that here in New York City, we have taken a really aggressive approach to trying to make the case that New York City is the place, not just for the tech ecosystem, but really for America to show the kind of inclusive economy and country that we want to be. And New York is, in fact, without a doubt, safer and a stronger place because of these pro-inclusive policies that we have been putting into the place for the past 4 years. This is reflected very much, I think, in where we are in our economy, where I think we are really at the inflection point where tech has and innovation is infusing and inspiring and impacting every single sector. We often talk about legacy sectors in New York City. We talk about fashion and culture and finance and media and manufacturing, healthcare, government, real estate, and of course education. I mean, New York is the opposite of a one-company town, but we are a town where every single one of these industries is being transformed and informed by the evolution and revolution of technology. We call it, I'm sure you all know, we sort of think of it as the hyphen tech capital of the world, and a place where you're not just thinking amazing thoughts, ideating, innovating, but also a place where you can implement your ideas at scale. And that's why I think we really can safely say that what's fueling a lot of what's going on in the ed tech community is that agglomeration of different sectors and industries here. As Jonathan just mentioned today, our Economic Development Corporation is joining NYU Steinhardt and StartEd Inc. to put out the latest snapshot of how NYC has vaulted really to the forefront of the ed tech sector. Over the past decade, which is, I guess, probably almost the entire life of this industry in many ways, New York City-based ed tech firms have received over $1 billion in venture capital, which again is, you know, for New York City, a huge, huge benchmark, because at least the perception is that there's not a lot of venture capital flowing into the tech community on the East Coast, that it's really focused on the Valley, and that kind of benchmarking is really important to recognize and celebrate. We're also leading the nation in ed tech firm acquisition, so there's a lot of activity going on in the sector, and we have the highest ed tech job demand of any city in the country. We just got the latest numbers that salaries in the two largest subsectors of ed tech which is corporate training and computer training, have shot up to an average of $95,000 a year, which again is no joke. That's a serious salary for many people who are trying to raise a family here in New York City. And so what's ultimately fueling that growth? In addition to the diversity of our economy, which I think I can't really say enough about how important the diversity of the economy is to fueling any of the individual subsectors of the economy, I think it's also because the education sector itself is so enormous. I mean, crazy, crazy, crazy fabulous numbers, right? You have 2 million students in New York City. You have 350,000 public school teachers. That's just public school teachers alone. We have 2,500 K through 12 schools. I mean, talk about a laboratory. 2,500 schools are in our system. We have 55 colleges and universities. We have the most amazing and extensive public library systems. We have hundreds of millions of dollars every year we spend on workforce training and skills building, very targeted. We have an enormous publishing industry, and we have 2.3 million workers with at least a bachelor's degree. And again, I can't put that enough into context. That is more than DC, Boston, San Francisco, and Philadelphia combined. So the depth of our workforce here is like none other in the country. I think we always like to put a quote up at these things, and John Updike, I always like to go to, really said it best. Nowhere else in the world comes close to the kind of fundamental infrastructure we have in this market, and we are the ultimate laboratory. And again, from where I sit, that's extraordinarily exciting because these are the assets that draw an engine for all sectors, as I said, well beyond ed tech, but connected to tech, right? Having this educated workforce, having this kind of excitement really allows us to have the kind of vitals, right? The vitals that feed the machine of the kind of economic development initiatives that we are very focused on. One I want to mention, because it was obviously so much in the news today, was our bid for Amazon's second headquarters. I use this really as a point of illustration because in many respects, everybody here in this room knows, everybody in New York City is obsessed with real estate, right? How much do you pay in rent? How can you afford to buy an apartment? Where is your office going to be? Real estate is, in many respects, perceived to be the currency of New York City. And we did a fantastic job in our Amazon bid talking about the kind of diversity of neighborhoods and real estate assets that we have here in New York that would feed Amazon's needs for millions and millions of square feet. And we offered them four very distinct different geographies. But when we stepped back and we really thought about what is the fundamental competitive advantage of New York City, the heart of that bid and our bid is really about the talent pool and the potential for these cross-sector partnerships. Again, always going back to this theme of the unbelievable diversity of what's going on in this town is really the difference maker, right? It's what's going to make New York City the ultimate contender for Amazon. Because again, if you need 50,000 of the smartest people on earth so you can be the biggest, most innovative, most powerful company in the world, where else are you going to go, right? You're going to go to New York City because of the depth of the talent and the educational apparatus that exists to continue to feed that talent pool. And so that kind of pitch that we made to Amazon, it's important and it'd be great if we get Amazon, but again, we're New York City, so it's not going to move the needle for us in the way it would move the needle for a Pittsburgh or another city like that where 50,000 jobs is probably the entire educated workforce at some level. But the point of the bid and the point of this is to say, and I mean that like with loving, it's nice, but I mean, at the end of the day, we have 4.7 million people work in New York City. But I think that the point is that that kind of unbelievable focus on talent and education and feeding a machine of the smartest, most innovative workforce in America is what really is going to make companies want to come and start here and grow here over the long time, for the long run. And we do this in a couple of different ways, also more concrete. It's really about making these investments, again, in all pieces of the education sector. So that's why we've invested, I think now about $80 million in our Computer Science for All initiative. I know many of you are involved in that. And also in our Tech Talent Pipeline, which again, these are both ways in which we're continuing to focus on the needs of employers and the skills that they need so that we can feed New York City educated kids into the tech ecosystem. I think that we have to also just say a little bit about basic stuff, right? basic stuff about why New York City is a place that companies want to be here. These infrastructure, these partnerships I'm talking about with the workforce development and education sectors are really vital to our long-term competitiveness, but it's also as important in many ways, right, as safe streets, good schools, and reliable transit, right? You need to be in a city that produces all of those things for its workers. And I think this administration recognizes that our role also as a consumer of ed tech, as well as being a laboratory and a talent. As I mentioned, obviously, we run the largest school system in the country, and so we're also huge consumers. And so we try to use those purchasing power, if you will, to advance an agenda that, again, is feeding into our economic development strategy. So we foster those kinds of partnerships with large, big publicly traded companies like Scholastic, who have thousands of employees here, and decades in the business of education and huge balance sheets. But we're also just as focused, and I know that's going to be a lot of what you guys are talking about over these days, with small companies, right? As purchasers, as the government, we can help the smallest companies also grow. So we're equally as focused on firms like Schoology that will help teachers share lesson plans, and with funding and supporting organizations like Girls Who Code, who are teaching our young women, what could be a more important topic today than any time, teaching young women to have the skills they need in order to compete for 21st century jobs. So this is what we're here to do. We're here to work with you to bring the resources you need to your businesses that ultimately bring the talent, the ideas, the technology into the classroom. And we also get to involve and invest in really locally based firms in the process. So really just an opportunity to say, New York City has it all, right? It's sort of the obvious thing to say. But what we're really committed to doing, and I know that many of you here are as well, we really want to make sure that the children and the people who are from New York City, who are coming to New York City in this extraordinarily inclusive and dynamic city, at a time when most people want to put their head in the ground and say we can't solve big problems, we can solve big problems, and we want to do that by investing in people and small companies like yours. Our door is open. We want to hear it. We are innovators. We are also purchasers. So please, help us put into practice some of the best ideas to make this city and country even better. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks.